A wealthy CEO fakes a fainting spell. He wasn't prepared for what she did. The moment Alexander Crowe let his body collapse against the marble floor, he calculated everything: the angle of the fall, the shallow breathing, the stillness convincing enough to pass as a fainting spell. As CEO of one of the most ruthless investment firms in Manhattan, he trusted numbers more than people. And people, in his experience, always revealed who they were when they believed no one was watching. Lying there, eyes closed, pulse steady, he waited. This was supposed to be simple. A test. A confirmation of something he already believed about the quiet woman who cleaned his penthouse every evening after midnight. Elena froze when she saw him on the floor. The mop slipped from her hands, water spreading like a dark stain across the white tiles. She should have screamed. She should have run for security. Instead, she stood there trembling, as if the sight of his motionless body had unlocked something buried deep inside her chest. Alexander expected hesitation, fear, maybe indifference. What he did not expect was the way her face crumpled, as if his fall had struck her personally, like history repeating itself in the most cruel way. She knelt beside him slowly, not touching at first, whispering his name even though he had never told it to her. Her voice shook, thick with memories that didn't belong in a billionaire's penthouse. When her fingers finally brushed his wrist, they lingered too long, searching desperately for life. Alexander felt it then, the warmth of her hands, the urgency, the panic she couldn't hide. This was no rehearsed concern. This was raw. Unfiltered. Dangerous. Elena's composure shattered. She spoke to him like someone she had once loved and lost, confessing things no employee should ever say to her employer. About her son asleep in a cramped apartment. About a promise she once made beside a hospital bed. About how she couldn't watch another man disappear while she did nothing. Alexander's chest tightened. The test was slipping out of his control, and for the first time in years, he didn't know whether to stop it. As she reached into her pocket with shaking hands, making a decision that could cost her everything, Alexander realized the truth too late. This wasn't about exposing her character anymore. It was about exposing his own. And whatever she was about to do, whatever line she was about to cross, would shatter the carefully built distance between power and vulnerability forever. The city outside the penthouse pulsed with restless light as Alexander Crowe lay between control and consequence, a man who had built an empire by never letting emotion outrun logic. For years, he had mastered the art of watching without being seen: boardrooms, negotiations, even grief after his wife's death, always distant, always composed. Elena had entered his life the same way everything else did, quietly, efficiently, replaceable. A single mother with tired eyes, hired through an agency, working nights so her son wouldn't see how close exhaustion sat to despair. He noticed her because she never lingered, never asked questions, never looked him in the eye. That silence unsettled him. People with nothing to hide were rarely that careful. So he staged the fall, convincing himself it was harmless, just another test in a life defined by control. But now, listening to her fractured breathing and the urgency in her voice, the lines began to blur. He didn't know yet that this single moment would fracture two lives at once, hers, already balanced on the edge, and his, fortified but hollow. If you've ever believed you truly understood the people around you, this story will challenge that certainty. And if you're drawn to stories where power collides with vulnerability, where quiet choices rewrite destinies, make sure you're subscribed, because what unfolds from this night will move faster than either of them can stop, and nothing, absolutely nothing, will remain the same. Alexander chose the moment carefully. Just as Elena's shaking fingers hovered over her phone, he let out a strained breath and shifted slightly, as if dragged back from the edge. Her gasp cut through the penthouse like glass breaking. She stumbled backward, nearly falling, eyes wide with shock and fear colliding at once. For a split second, they stared at each other, him on the floor, her kneeling beside him, two people suddenly exposed in a way neither had consented to. I was about to call for help, Elena said, her voice rushing ahead of her thoughts. She stood quickly, smoothing her uniform as if professionalism could erase what had just happened. Alexander pushed himself up slowly, feigning disorientation, but his eyes never left her face. He saw the fear fade into something sharper, humiliation. She had let herself care. Worse, she had let him see it. "I'm fine," he said, keeping his tone controlled. "Just dizzy." The lie felt heavier than expected. Elena nodded too fast, already retreating toward the cleaning cart. She apologized repeatedly, for things that weren't her fault, for emotions she hadn't been allowed to have. That was when Alexander felt the first crack, an unfamiliar discomfort twisting in his chest. He hadn't planned for this reaction. Not from her. Not from himself. As she resumed cleaning, her movements became mechanical, rushed, as if she were trying to erase the last 10 minutes. Alexander watched from the sofa, pretending to recover, but his attention sharpened. Her hands trembled. She wiped the same surface 3 times. This wasn't just embarrassment, it was fear. Real fear, the kind born from knowing how easily one mistake could cost everything. The silence broke when Elena's phone buzzed softly in her pocket. She froze. Alexander saw her glance at it, panic flashing across her face. She hesitated, then answered in a whisper, turning away. "I'm working," she murmured. "Yes, I know. I'll come as soon as I can." Her voice cracked on the last word. When she hung up, she pressed her fingers against her eyes for a fraction of a second, long enough to betray exhaustion she could no longer hide. Alexander stood. The sudden movement made her flinch. "Is there a problem?" he asked, sharper than he intended. Elena shook her head immediately. "No, sir. Everything's fine." The lie was obvious. He hated that he recognized it so easily. For years, he had ignored these signs in others. Tonight, he couldn't look away. "You don't have to stay late," he said. The word surprised them both. Elena looked at him, truly looked at him, confusion replacing fear. "I need the hours," she replied quietly. No self-pity. Just fact. The kind of answer that carried weight because it wasn't asking for anything. He nodded, stepping aside, but the distance between them felt charged now. Elena returned to work, faster, almost frantic. A glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. She dropped to her knees instantly, apologizing, reaching for the shards with bare fingers. Blood bloomed red against the white tile. "Stop," Alexander said sharply, crossing the room. He grabbed her wrist before she could protest. She stiffened, eyes filling, not with pain, but with panic. "Please," she whispered, "I'll clean it." "I can't afford." Her voice broke completely this time. Alexander released her hand slowly, staring at the blood on her skin as if seeing proof of something undeniable. This wasn't a woman who needed to be tested. This was a woman who had been surviving without anyone noticing. And standing there, surrounded by luxury and silence, Alexander realized his fainting spell hadn't revealed her weakness, it had exposed the first undeniable evidence of his own. Alexander insisted on tending the cut himself. He led Elena to the kitchen island, opening a drawer she hadn't even known existed, pulling out a first aid kit as pristine as everything else in the penthouse. She tried to protest, but the words dissolved the moment he knelt in front of her, wrapping gauze around her finger with surprising care. The power imbalance shifted, subtle but undeniable. For the first time, she wasn't the one cleaning up after him. "I didn't mean to drop it," she said, staring at the marble. "I'm usually careful." He believed her. More than that, he believed the apology was reflex, drilled into her by years of being one mistake away from losing stability. "You're bleeding," he replied simply. "That matters." The sentence hung between them, heavier than it should have been. Silence pressed in, thick and awkward, until Elena pulled her hand back gently. "I should finish," she said. Alexander hesitated, then nodded. As she walked away, he noticed something he hadn't before, the way she favored her right side, as if guarding an old injury. A pattern. Another unasked question. Minutes later, her phone rang again. This time louder. Elena stiffened, then answered, panic creeping back into her voice. Alexander didn't try not to listen. I told you, she whispered, I'm working. Please don't wake him. Her knees buckled slightly when she hung up, and she grabbed the counter to steady herself. Who was that? Alexander asked before he could stop himself. Elena's shoulders tensed. My neighbor, she lied quickly. He didn't challenge her, but the way her eyes darted away told him everything. He had seen that look in boardrooms right before deals collapsed. Fear disguised as composure. He made a decision that felt reckless. You can take the night off, he said. I'll pay you for the full shift. Elena turned slowly, disbelief written across her face. I can't, she said. If I leave, I lose this job. The words landed like a confession. Not of guilt, but of vulnerability. You won't, Alexander replied. His tone carried authority, the kind that had ended arguments and silenced rooms. Elena studied his face, searching for sarcasm, for a trap. Finding none, her breath hitched. She pressed her lips together, fighting something dangerously close to tears. My son is sick, she said finally. The truth slipped out, fragile and exposed. I work nights because I can't afford to miss days. If I don't show up, they replace me. Her voice steadied at the end, as if repeating a rule she lived by. Alexander felt the words settle in his chest, reshaping something he hadn't realized was still there. He reached for his phone, already calculating solutions, but stopped. This wasn't a transaction. This was a moment that demanded presence, not power. Go, he said instead. I'll have a driver take you. Elena shook her head instinctively, then paused, torn between pride and desperation. When she finally nodded, relief flooded her face so fast it was almost painful to watch. As she hurried to gather her things, Alexander stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of the night settling in. He had faked a fainting spell to confirm his suspicions. Instead, he had opened a door he could no longer close, and somewhere beyond it, the careful boundaries of his world were already starting to collapse. The car ride across the city was silent except for the hum of traffic and Elena's shallow breathing. She sat rigid in the back seat, hands folded tightly in her lap, replaying every moment of the night as if searching for the exact second her life had tilted. When the car stopped in front of her apartment building, she hesitated, fingers hovering over the door handle. Thank you, she said softly, not looking back. Alexander watched her disappear into the dim stairwell, an unease settling in that no deal gone wrong had ever produced. He didn't sleep. Instead, he paced the penthouse, replaying her voice, her panic, the blood on her finger. The test had been crueler than he intended, and intention suddenly felt like a weak defense. By morning, he made a decision that would have once felt unnecessary. He ordered a full background check, then cancelled it minutes later. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. At dawn, Elena sat beside her son's bed, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. Mateo's breathing was uneven, his small hand gripping hers like an anchor. She whispered reassurances she wasn't sure she believed, promising things she didn't know how to deliver. When his eyes fluttered open, she smiled through the fear. I'm here, she said. She always was. That was the promise she never broke. Her phone buzzed. Alexander's name appeared on the screen, sending a jolt of panic through her chest. She answered cautiously. I arranged a doctor, he said, skipping pleasantries. They'll be there in 20 minutes. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. I can't pay, she began. This isn't about money, he interrupted. Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. The doctor arrived, calm and efficient, confirming a severe infection that would have worsened without treatment. Elena's knees nearly gave out at the relief. As the doctor left, she sank into a chair, shaking. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in years. She didn't plan to start now, but the tears came anyway. Alexander arrived shortly after, standing awkwardly in the narrow apartment, his tailored suit out of place among chipped paint and mismatched furniture. He took in the space without comment, but something in his expression shifted. This wasn't weakness. This was resilience carved out of necessity. "I didn't know," he said quietly. It wasn't an excuse. It was an admission. Elena wiped her eyes quickly. "You weren't supposed to," she replied. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than accusation. They stood there, separated by more than class or circumstance, by years of choices that had never allowed for overlap. Yet, in that moment, the distance felt thinner. Matteo stirred, calling for his mother. Elena went to him immediately. Alexander watched, understanding something fundamental for the first time: care was not an instinct. It was a discipline. "I'll cover your missed hours," he said when she returned. "And your job is safe." Elena's shoulders slumped with relief, but her eyes hardened slightly. "I don't want favors," she said. "I want stability." The word landed like a challenge. Alexander nodded slowly. Stability. He had built empires on that promise for investors. Now, standing in a cramped apartment with a sick child and a woman who refused to be pitied, he realized the true cost of never offering it to the people closest to him. The crisis didn't arrive through gossip or headlines. It arrived through an eviction notice slid under Elena's door at 6 in the morning. The paper felt heavier than it should have, the words sharp and unforgiving. 3 weeks overdue. Final warning. She sat on the kitchen floor staring at it while Matteo slept, her chest tight with the familiar terror she thought she'd finally outrun. She went to work that night anyway. That was her instinct: move forward, don't collapse. But her focus fractured. She missed spots. She dropped the mop twice. When Alexander noticed, he didn't ask questions. He watched. And for the first time, he didn't analyze, he recognized the look. The look of someone about to lose ground. "You're distracted," he said gently. Elena stiffened, ready with a lie, but exhaustion won. She reached into her bag and handed him the folded notice without a word. Alexander read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but resolve. "This ends tonight," he said calmly. Elena shook her head immediately. "I don't want charity," she said, her voice breaking despite herself. Alexander met her eyes. "This isn't charity. This is correction." He picked up his phone and made 2 calls, short, precise, irreversible. Within an hour, a housing attorney arrived at the penthouse. The eviction was frozen. Illegal fees uncovered. The landlord flagged. Elena watched in stunned silence as the world rearranged itself in real time. Not promises. Not sympathy. Action. Alexander didn't stop there. He walked her through documents, not contracts, but options. A company-backed emergency housing fund. Temporary relocation assistance. Guaranteed stability for 6 months, no repayment, no conditions. Everything transparent. Everything documented. Elena's hands trembled as she signed, not from fear, but relief so sharp it hurt. The next morning, she stood in the doorway of a small, sunlit apartment overlooking a quiet park. Matteo ran inside laughing, claiming the bedroom by the window before she could even process what she was seeing. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely as reality finally landed. Alexander didn't enter the apartment. He stayed in the hallway, giving space where power once demanded proximity. "You're safe here," he said simply. No dramatic speech. No expectation. Just truth. Later that evening, Elena sent him a single message: "We slept without fear tonight." Alexander read it twice, then set his phone down, something loosening in his chest. This tangible change, was something he could stand behind publicly. And as the city moved on around them, both understood the shift that had occurred. Elena wasn't surviving anymore. She was standing on solid ground. And Alexander, watching the consequences of his choices finally turn constructive, realized that real redemption wasn't quiet. It was visible, immediate, and impossible to ignore. The apartment changed Elena's mornings first. Sunlight instead of flickering bulbs. Silence instead of neighbors arguing through thin walls. Matteo slept through the night for the first time in weeks, sprawled across his new bed like a victory he didn't know he'd won. Elena stood in the kitchen holding a mug of coffee she hadn't rushed to drink, her body slow to trust the quiet. She returned to work 3 days later, not to clean, but to meet with the agency director. Her stomach twisted as she walked into the office, expecting suspicion, penalties, questions. Instead, she was handed a revised contract. Higher hourly rate. Fixed schedule. Health coverage. The director avoided her eyes, explaining that new policies had been implemented company-wide. Elena signed with steady hands. When she stepped outside, the weight she'd carried for years finally slipped. She sat on the steps and cried, not softly, not politely. Full breaths. Full release. That same afternoon, Alexander stood in a glass conference room facing his board. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He presented changes already executed, funds allocated, safeguards installed, authority redistributed. Some directors pushed back. 2 resigned. He accepted their letters without comment. Later, cameras waited in the lobby. Alexander stopped in front of them, answering questions plainly. No dramatic pauses. No crafted redemption. Just acknowledgement, clarity, and direction. The clip spread fast. Not because it was emotional, but because it was rare. That evening, Elena arrived at the park near her new building. Alexander was already there, sitting on a bench with Matteo, helping him assemble a kite that refused to cooperate. When the kite finally lifted, Matteo laughed so loudly people turned to look. Elena watched from a distance, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Choice. When she joined them, Alexander stood, giving space automatically. No reach. No assumption. Thank you, she said. It wasn't small. It wasn't owed. It was deliberate. Alexander nodded once. You did the hard part, he replied. They walked home together, unhurried. Matteo between them, telling a story that made no sense and somehow made perfect sense. Elena listened, grounded in the rhythm of footsteps and streetlights. Nothing was promised that night. But when they stopped outside her building, neither rushed away. And in that pause, quiet, balanced, unforced, something solid took shape. Not rescue. Not debt. Just the beginning of something neither of them had been able to afford before. The months that followed were ordinary in ways that felt extraordinary. Elena paid her bills on time. Matteo started school without fear of moving again. The refrigerator stayed full. Stability became routine, not a miracle. Alexander didn't appear in her life as a savior or a solution, but as a constant, showing up for public meetings, staying late at school events, sitting in waiting rooms without speaking over anyone. When questions resurfaced, he answered them the same way he had before, without polish or retreat. Their connection grew in visible steps, shared weekends, quiet dinners, laughter that came easily because it wasn't borrowed. One evening, as they watched Matteo fall asleep in the apartment that no longer felt temporary, Elena reached for Alexander's hand first. It wasn't dramatic. It was certain. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that somewhere within it, 2 lives once defined by imbalance had found alignment. The fainting spell that started it all faded into memory, not as a trick, not as a test, but as the moment a story stopped being about control and became about staying.